In South Los Angeles, most hustlers dream of getting out, but Nipsey Hussle, born Ermias Joseph Asghedom, risked everything to buy back the same block that defined him. The world knows his mixtape gamble and Grammy nods, but few realize how the kid who once sold CDs from his car in Crenshaw turned street survival into community ownership, walking away from major label deals and fronting his own money at every step. This is the real money story behind the hustler who bought his block back, where one man's defiance reshaped his neighborhood's future. But what drove Nipsey to turn his back on quick fame for a marathon no one else believed in? And what did it really cost? The answers begin where his story began. August 15, 1985. In the heart of Crenshaw, a neighborhood where the lines between hope and hardship run thin, Ermias Joseph Asghedom entered the world. His mother, Angelique Smith, traced her roots to Black Los Angeles. His father, DeWitt Asghedom, carried the legacy of Eritrea, a nation shaped by war, exile, and relentless determination. Their union brought together two worlds, both marked by struggle, both hungry for something better. Growing up, Nipsey shared a tiny apartment with his brother Samuel, known on the block as Black Sam, and his sister Samantha. The sound of helicopters overhead, the threat of police raids, and the constant presence of street crews were not just background noise, but daily reality. Crenshaw in the late 1980s and 90s offered no easy exits. For most kids, the future meant picking a side, finding a hustle, or getting swallowed by the system. Nipsey's father worked long hours, sometimes disappearing for stretches to earn enough to keep the family afloat. His mother juggled jobs, making sure her children never went hungry, even when the rent came late. At home, stories from Eritrea mixed with South Central slang. Nipsey learned early that survival meant adapting, reading people, and never letting your guard down. School felt more like a holding cell than a path out. By his teens, Nipsey was drifting from classrooms to street corners, drawn to the codes of the Rollin' 60s neighborhood Crips. For some, that choice meant a dead end. For Nipsey, it was the beginning of a different kind of education, one that taught him who to trust, how to move, and why self-reliance was the only insurance policy that mattered. In this world, every dollar counted, and every lesson came with a price. But out of the chaos, Nipsey started to see patterns, the way older hustlers controlled their own fate, the value of loyalty, and the rare moments when someone used their hustle to lift up the block instead of just escaping it. That's where the seeds of his ambition took root, not in a boardroom, but on cracked pavement, under the weight of history and expectation. By the time most kids his age were still figuring out what they wanted to be, Nipsey was already building something real. In a cramped bedroom, he pieced together a home studio from second-hand equipment and borrowed wires, teaching himself how to record, mix, and master tracks long before he could afford real studio time. He didn't wait for a record deal or a handout. He learned to make beats, burn CDs, and design his own covers, all with whatever tools he could find. Every mixtape was a product of late nights and street wisdom, pressed up in small batches and sold hand to hand. Nipsey and Black Sam would load up the trunk of their car and hit the blocks around Crenshaw, selling music directly to the people who lived the same stories he rapped about. There was no middleman, no distributor, no safety net, just raw hustle and a belief that if you put in the work, somebody would listen. This was more than just a way to make money. It was a lesson in ownership, in learning the value of every dollar earned and every fan gained one at a time. The feedback was instant. If the music hit, word would spread and sales would follow. If it didn't, you felt it in the silence. For Nipsey, that kind of direct connection was everything. It taught him how to read people, how to adjust, and how to stay hungry. Years later, he'd look back and say, "I learned more selling CDs out the trunk than I ever did in school." That hands-on grind laid the foundation for everything that came next. It wasn't just about music. It was about proving you could build something from nothing and that the block could be your first investor if you treated it right. By 2010, Nipsey Hussle was done waiting for a seat at someone else's table. Instead, he built his own. That year, he founded All Money in No Money Out, an independent label with a name that doubled as a business plan. No outside investors, no major label advances, and no industry middlemen siphoning off the profits. Just Nipsey, his brother Black Sam, and a handful of trusted partners from Crenshaw, pooling what they had to create something that belonged entirely to them. All Money In wasn't just a logo stamped on mixtapes, it was a real operation. Contracts, split sheets, and a roster that included local talent like Cuzzy Capone and Jay Stone, artists who shared Nipsey's vision of turning street credibility into real equity. Every dollar earned stayed in the circle, reinvested in music, merchandise, and the lives of the people who built the brand from scratch. While other artists chased major label deals, Nipsey turned down 360 contracts that would have handed over a cut of everything: music, touring, even merchandise. To him, ownership meant freedom. He wanted to own his masters, his story, and the means to tell it. All Money In became the blueprint for a new kind of hustle, one that measured success not by radio spins or industry applause, but by how much power you kept in your own hands. For Nipsey, this was the first real step from hustling on the corner to running an enterprise, and it set the foundation for every bold move that followed. Turning down major label deals wasn't just a business move for Nipsey, it was a statement. At a time when most new artists would sign anything for an advance and a shot at radio play, Nipsey and Black Sam studied the contracts closely. The so-called 360 deals on the table meant giving up a piece of everything: album sales, touring, merchandise, even endorsements. In exchange, the label promised promotion and access to the big stage, but the fine print always favored the house. Nipsey wanted more than a fast check. He wanted to own his masters, keep control of his brand, and decide where every dollar went. That's why All Money In was built to be bulletproof. No outside investors, no corporate strings. Every negotiation was a test of principle. Industry execs would dangle offers, but Nipsey kept walking away. Black Sam put it simply: Nip wanted ownership, not handouts. He wanted to show people we could control our own narrative. That choice didn't come without pressure. Friends questioned the strategy, and some in the business called it stubborn or naive. But for Nipsey and Sam, the risk of giving up control was greater than the risk of going it alone. They understood that true independence meant betting on themselves, even if it meant building slower, brick by brick. The philosophy became a challenge. Prove that you could win without playing by the old rules. Every refusal, every deal left on the table raised the stakes for what came next. In October 2013, Nipsey Hussle announced a move that nobody in the music business had tried before. He dropped the Crenshaw mixtape as a free download, but also pressed up exactly 1,000 physical copies, each one hand-numbered and priced at $100. The plan was simple but bold. Test how much value his most loyal fans placed on direct connection, and raise real capital without a single dollar from a record label. He called it the Proud to Pay campaign. Word spread fast, both on social media and in the streets. Fans lined up at the Slauson Avenue pop-up, cash in hand, eager to claim their copy and a piece of the story. Each sale came with perks, like concert tickets and the chance for a personal phone call from Nipsey himself. But the real incentive was supporting an artist who refused to play by the old rules. Within 24 hours, every copy was gone. The campaign pulled in $100,000, all cash, with no middleman taking a cut. The biggest headline: Jay-Z quietly bought 100 copies for $10,000, sending a message to the entire industry about the power of independent thinking. For Nipsey, it was more than a payday. It was proof that trust and loyalty could be monetized, that you could turn street credibility into economic power. The proud-to-pay strategy gave him capital to reinvest, but it also validated his belief that ownership of music, of business, of narrative was worth more than a quick advance or a radio hit. The $100 mixtape wasn't just a stunt, it was the blueprint for a new kind of hustle. The buzz from the Proud to Pay campaign didn't just travel through Crenshaw. Word reached the highest levels of hip-hop, where moves like this weren't just rare, they were almost unheard of. In the middle of the sellout, Jay-Z made his move. Quietly, he bought 100 copies of the $100 Crenshaw mixtape, dropping $10,000 in a single transaction. No press release, no staged photo op. Just a direct show of support, sent through Roc Nation channels and confirmed by Nipsey's team. For the industry, this wasn't about charity. It was a statement from one mogul to another. Real power comes from betting on yourself. Jay-Z later explained, "Supporting people that think outside the box is important. That's how culture moves forward." This wasn't just a cosign. It was a public stamp of legitimacy for Nipsey's business model. Suddenly, the conversation shifted. Major outlets picked up the story. Executives who once called Nipsey's approach reckless started asking how he pulled it off. Fans who bought the mixtape felt like insiders to something historic. The numbers told one part of the story, but Jay-Z's endorsement turned the $100 mixtape into a cultural blueprint. For Nipsey, it meant his vision didn't just work on the block, it resonated with the architects of the game itself. That validation set the stage for everything he would build next, turning independence from a lonely road into a movement with real weight. In the summer of 2017, the corner of Slauson and Crenshaw saw something it had never seen before. Where once there were liquor stores and swap meets, now stood the Marathon Clothing, a flagship store with Nipsey's name on the lease and his vision in every detail. This wasn't just another apparel shop. It was a smart store, wired with technology that let fans unlock exclusive music and content by scanning tags on the clothing. The idea was simple: bring innovation to the block and let the people who built the culture experience it first. Nipsey called it the intersection of culture, technology, and community. He wanted customers to feel like owners, not just buyers. The store doubled as a community hub, a place where local kids could see entrepreneurship up close and where artists, business leaders, and neighbors crossed paths every day. It became a gathering spot, part fashion boutique, part museum, part headquarters for anyone who believed in the marathon mindset. Opening day drew crowds that spilled into the street. Local officials, industry insiders, and longtime fans all showed up, eager to see what Nipsey had built. But for Nip, the meaning went deeper. He was standing on the same pavement where he used to sell mixtapes out of his trunk, now inviting the world to come inside. Every fixture and mural in the store told a piece of his story, each one a reminder that ownership was possible, even in a place where most people were told to settle for less. The Marathon Clothing was more than a brand launch. It was a statement that the block could be a platform, not just a backdrop. The store's smart features weren't just for hype. They represented Nipsey's push to bridge street culture and Silicon Valley, giving his neighborhood access to the kind of tools usually reserved for the other side of town. And with every sale, every event, and every conversation that happened inside those walls, Nipsey kept showing what it looked like to bet on yourself and win. The blueprint was right there, stitched into every garment and echoed in every song that played through the speakers. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. In 2018, just blocks from where he once hustled mixtapes, Nipsey Hussle opened the doors to Vector 90, a space that looked nothing like the usual blueprint for South Central. Instead of retail racks or recording booths, Vector 90 offered co-working desks, glass-walled meeting rooms, and a classroom for coding workshops. The goal was simple on paper, but radical in practice. Bring tech opportunity to Crenshaw, and make sure local kids had a shot at the future being built in Silicon Valley. For years, South LA had watched as tech jobs and investments skipped over its streets, funneling resources into other zip codes while leaving its own talent untapped. Nipsey saw the gap firsthand. He'd watched friends with sharp minds and big ideas get boxed out, not because they lacked hustle, but because they lacked access. Vector 90 was his answer, a bridge between worlds that rarely touched. He wanted young people from his block to see themselves as creators, not just consumers of new technology. He wanted them to walk into a space that felt like it belonged to them, where they could pitch ideas, learn to code, or just dream bigger than the boundaries set by circumstance. The launch drew attention from more than just local press. Tech founders, investors, and educators showed up, curious to see if a co-working hub could really thrive in a place known more for street politics than startup culture. Nipsey didn't just cut a ribbon and pose for photos. He put up his own money, partnered with local entrepreneurs, and built programming that reflected the needs of the neighborhood. STEM classes for teens, business workshops for adults, and mentorship programs that paired local youth with engineers and designers from across the city. Vector 90 wasn't about charity, it was about equity. It gave young people the tools to compete, not just participate. In a city where the tech boom had mostly meant higher rents and new faces, Nipsey's approach flipped the script. He wanted the next generation to own patents, launch companies, and build careers that would ripple through families and blocks for decades. By 2018, Vector 90 stood as proof that economic empowerment didn't have to wait for outside permission. It could be built brick by brick right where the story began. In January 2019, Nipsey Hussle made the kind of move most rappers only talk about. He and his business partner, David Gross, closed on a $2.5 million deal to buy the L-shaped shopping center at 3416 West Slauson Avenue. This was the same strip where Nipsey once hustled mixtapes out of his trunk, long before the world knew his name. Now, his name was on the deed. The Marathon Clothing Store, Master Burger, and a handful of other small businesses sat on that lot, right at the heart of Crenshaw. For decades, landlords from outside the neighborhood collected the rent and set the rules. Nipsey flipped the script. He turned the parking lot where he once got chased off by security into a place where he called the shots. The negotiation wasn't easy. Property values in South LA had been climbing, pushed by new rail lines and outside investors circling for a chance to cash in on the next wave of gentrification. Nipsey and Gross faced skeptical sellers, city red tape, and the pressure of raising millions without the kind of corporate backing most real estate deals require. But Nipsey's business model was different. He brought together local investors, leveraged the capital from his music, and convinced partners that this was more than just a retail play, it was about legacy. The purchase sent a message that rippled through the city. For years, the corner of Slauson and Crenshaw had been a symbol of struggle and survival. Now, it was a blueprint for ownership. Nipsey didn't just want to run a store, he wanted to own the dirt under his feet, to make sure the block stayed in the hands of the people who built it. David Gross, who shared Nipsey's vision, called it economic activism. Together, They started drawing up plans to turn the shopping center into a mixed-use development, with affordable housing, retail, and space for local businesses to thrive. Neighbors noticed the difference right away. Rent checks started staying local. Business owners who once feared eviction now had a landlord who knew their names. One Crenshaw resident put it simply: he gave people around here hope. For Nipsey, this was the ultimate conversion of hustle into asset. He'd spent years preaching about ownership, about turning street smarts into generational wealth. Now the proof was stamped in county records and anchored in concrete. The block that once defined his beginnings now carried his legacy forward, brick by brick. March 31st, 2019. The corner of Slauson and Crenshaw, once a symbol of hustle and hope, fell into a hush that stretched across Los Angeles. Word spread in minutes. Nipsey Hussle had been shot outside the Marathon clothing store. In the hours that followed, crowds gathered on the sidewalk, some in disbelief, others in tears, all searching for answers in the place that had come to represent possibility. The sirens faded, but the shock did not. For many in Crenshaw, it felt like losing a brother, a mentor, or the one person who made them believe change was possible here. People who had watched Nipsey turn parking lots into platforms now stood shoulder to shoulder, candles flickering along the curb. Fans drove in from every part of the city, some clutching Marathon shirts, others just needing to be near the spot where so much had started. The air was heavy with grief, but also with gratitude. Local business owners left handwritten notes taped to their doors. Young people who had attended Vector 90 coding classes or shopped at the store shared stories of encouragement and second chances. Even those who never met Nipsey spoke of him like family, someone who made success look like them, sound like them, and live next door. News cameras circled, but the real testimony came from neighbors who remembered the early days. They spoke about the first mixtapes, the late-night studio sessions, and the way Nipsey always circled back to invest in the block that raised him. City officials paused to recognize what he had built. But the most powerful tributes came from the streets. Murals blooming overnight on walls, hashtags multiplying across social media, and a single phrase echoing in every conversation: the marathon continues. In the days that followed, the community gathered not just to mourn, but to promise each other that Nipsey's work would not end here. The sense of loss was deep, but so was the resolve to carry forward the lessons he left behind, about ownership, about perseverance, and about lifting up the place you call home. Inside the Marathon clothing store, the lights stayed on. Even as the crowds thinned and the headlines faded, a quiet determination settled over the family Nipsey left behind. Black Sam, who had hustled mixtapes alongside his brother for years, stepped into a new kind of leadership. Not just to protect what they had built, but to make sure the doors never closed on the dreams Nipsey had set in motion. There was no public announcement, no corporate restructuring. Instead, the work continued. Orders shipped out, payroll met, and the same neighborhood faces kept showing up for their shifts. The family's approach was steady and deliberate. Black Sam handled the day-to-day, guiding decisions with the same long-term thinking that defined their earliest business moves. There was no rush to expand, no temptation to cash in on a wave of posthumous hype. Instead, the focus stayed on keeping the brand authentic, the message clear, and the ownership local. Lauren London, though not formally tied to operations, became a steady presence, her voice and support helping anchor the family's resolve. Nipsey's sister Samantha joined in, managing outreach and making sure the store's community ties stayed strong. Every new hire, every product drop, every decision about the store's future ran through this inner circle. They didn't just protect the Marathon name. They kept alive the sense of responsibility that came with it. The team resisted outside offers from corporations, eager to partner or buy in, holding fast to the principle that what was built on Crenshaw would stay with Crenshaw. Even as the brand's global profile grew, the family made sure that the business remained rooted in the same values Nipsey preached: self-reliance, transparency, and giving back. The oversight wasn't just about business, it was about legacy, about making sure the next generation saw that ownership could weather storms, that a family could carry forward a vision without watering it down. The marathon businesses didn't just survive, they became a living example of resilience, run by the same hands that once counted mixtape money in the back room. In Crenshaw, that kind of stewardship meant everything. The torch hadn't just been passed, it was being carried every day by the people who understood what it cost to light it in the first place. The phrase, "the marathon continues," didn't just echo through Crenshaw, it became a rallying cry around the world. What started as a mixtape title and a storefront slogan turned into a living philosophy. People from Johannesburg to London began quoting Nipsey's words, painting murals, and launching projects that carried his message forward. In classrooms, community centers, and barbershops, the idea took hold. Progress isn't about instant wins, but about steady, determined steps, one brick at a time. The power of that motto reached city planners and artists in Los Angeles, too. On Crenshaw Boulevard, a new project began to rise: Destination Crenshaw. Stretching for 1.3 miles, this open-air museum celebrates Black Los Angeles in the very neighborhood where Nipsey built his legacy. The vision was clear: turn the streets that once felt forgotten into a destination, a place where history and hope are honored in public art, gardens, and gathering spaces. City Councilman Marquise Harris Dawson credits Nipsey for inspiring the project's name and spirit, saying he wanted Crenshaw to be a destination, not a detour. Local artists and residents shaped every detail, from the sculptures lining the sidewalks to the stories etched into plaques and murals. The project isn't just about beautification, it's about telling the world that greatness can grow from overlooked blocks. Children walk past the installations and see themselves reflected in the faces and achievements on display. Business owners along the route talk about a renewed sense of pride, knowing that their neighborhood is no longer defined by struggle alone, but by creativity and resilience. Nipsey's ethos, ownership, perseverance, giving back, now lives in the fabric of the city. The slogan that once fit on a t-shirt or a mixtape cover has become a movement, inspiring people to invest in their own communities, to dream bigger, and to keep pushing forward no matter how long the road. In Crenshaw and beyond, the marathon isn't just about running, it's about never stopping. In January 2019, Nipsey Hussle and his partners purchased the Slauson Avenue property for $2.5 million, cementing years of independent hustle and strategic investment. From his early days selling mixtapes out of a car trunk to founding All Money in 2010 and rejecting industry-standard 360 deals, Nipsey built economic power through self-reliance. The $100 Crenshaw mixtape campaign in 2013, which sold 1,000 copies in one day and caught the attention of Jay-Z, provided proof that ownership and value could be redefined from within the community. After his death on March 31, 2019, Nipsey's family and business partners have continued to manage his enterprises, though full details about internal stewardship and long-term impacts remain private. Today, projects like Destination Crenshaw carry forward his vision of local empowerment. The evidence is clear. Nipsey Hussle's financial journey transformed not only his own life, but set a documented example of how community investment can be both possible and powerful. The marathon continues.